live. All right, welcome to Upturned Table. And tonight, let me double check my mic is correct. Yes, it is. All right. So tonight, it seems a little quiet. That's weird. How's that? All right, let's try that. Okay, so tonight is part 2 of Muspelheim. So this is the Muspelheim source book, and we're revisiting the dwarves. We got a comment on the channel from Sebastian Wozniak that asked to take a look at the Dwarven kingdoms, and I think it's a very interesting part of the dwarves. We just basically talked about their culture and the different races and their origins. So let's get into the Dwarven kingdoms, and they pretty much fall under all of the lands of Trudvang. So we'll take a look at that. There's I think a map right before. We should start with that maybe, and take a look. But thank you for joining me, and we'll keep this going throughout the new year. There's plenty more content. I still want to take a look at the 5e books. It looks like the setting book for the 5e conversion is pretty nice because it consolidates things without as much repetition as the omnibus version had. So we'll take a look at that, and also the tales from Trudvang. Should be a nice way to end things with some narrative. So let's turn to the section here that begins the kingdoms. But first, I think right before that, yeah, here we go. This is that nice, more topographical map, so you can see the scale of things, but also the how the lands lay. This is the Muspelheim version, so they give you a key to where all of these kingdoms lay, and of course they're underneath almost every part of the continent. And so we'll read through as many of these as we can tonight. So there may be a part 3. We'll see how long I can go. But here's the starting map, and they included a poster map of this, I believe, in the maybe the Stormlands, the Stormlands campaign. But I have a large version of this as well as the color version. So this is I really like the how these are done in this kind of sepia aged ink look. All right, so let's get started for tonight with the first kingdom. So this is Muspelheim, part 2. Tavalgoya. When Borjorn struck his mighty hammer, sparks flew into the deep cracks. The sparks transformed into worms, later into people, who immediately started digging. Around the same time the elves came to Trudvang, the dwarves created a kingdom of their own. Underground. This kingdom was called Tolovga by the dwarves. The great dwarven kingdom of Tolovga is called the Realm of Mitraka, or Trudvang, by the humans and the elves. By the humans, Trudvang by the elves, and the humans refer to it as Yukalinka, which means the Snake Kingdom, for all the passages that slither like snakes, and from the dwarven name for one of their gods. Tolovgoya is the largest and most ancient of the dwarven realms, spanning for miles under the great Iron Tooth and the wilderness of Nordland. It is composed of a never-ending series of tunnels and halls spreading throughout the various levels, which descend deeply into the roots of the mountains. Most of the ancient and greatest dwarven legends have an origin in Tolovgoya, and all dwarves know in their hearts where the origin of their race lies. So many customs, like the Glorka system and the traditions of the Thuls, have first appeared in Tolovgoya, millennia ago. The history of the great kingdom is therefore still seen with a respect by all of the dwarves. even if they are no more subjects of Tologoya. Furthermore, even if today most of the Dwarven kingdoms are independent from the Storthun, or Great Thun, of Novskorsk, Tologoya is still the imperial model to imitate for all other great Thuns throughout Muspelheim. The War of Semjalinka and Tovlog. It was not until the middle of the Age of Dreams that Tologoya was united under a single great Thun, or Storthum, as the dwarves call him. At the time, the Brjatas were at war with the Bojornikas, with many battles taking place near the great emptiness of Ginnungagap in the upper levels of the mountains. An immense amount of matraka had been discovered, and both the Barachas and the Bojornikas claimed the right to mine it. The Barachas were led by a champion smith, whose age was unknown. It was believed that he had lived since the beginning of time, and his name was well known in the tunnels of the mine. He was Semjalinka, and the legends say that he had managed to lure a Lusha worm into his furnace, where he crafted many beautiful things on the dragon fire. The Bojornika were led by the master of stone digging, Tovlog Bigbeard, and even though he was a simple though excellent stonemason, his knowledge of the art of war was great, as he had fought against Lusha worms many times. What started as minor battles in the narrow tunnels escalated eventually into a full-on war, and many dwarves died when they tried to defend their right to something that they believed belonged to them. The war lasted for almost 100 human years, but for the dwarves, this was like nothing in relation to how long their race has been alive. And because they tend to see history in terms of long lives of bloodlines, and not the short lives of singular dwarves. The battles began in the tunnels in the west, between Tolovgorod and Niflung, the middle and lower parts of the kingdom, and spread quickly eastward towards the heart of Tolovgorod. The Brjatas seemed impossible to beat. Their weapons were sharpened. Despite previous battles, their armor stood strong against the Bojornika's best picks and sharp spears. But Semjalinka especially showed great skill in the art of war. Not even Tovolog managed to deal with the Baracha's attacks. The Bojornika consulted their thuls. Let the smiths... Sorry. The Bojornika consulted their thuls. Let the smiths produce more and stronger weapons, and built more and bigger defenses. Nothing seemed to help, and soon Novskorsk and the inner halls were surrounded. The Bojornikas, who were not in the city, had fled into the upper parts of Gaidansky, the upper part of the realm, waiting for the great defeat. Like so many times in the past, and also in the future, the Bojornikas retreated further into the halls. They forged the gates and virtually... They forged the gates and virtually destroyed all the tunnels that led into Novskorsk. Then they sat down to wait. They waited for over 50 years and expected the Barachas to try to force themselves into the heart of the kingdom, and those who did not die in the small skirmishes in the narrow tunnels died of starvation. 8 out of 10 of the Bojornikas died, and only the hardiest of warriors managed to survive. Maybe this was a sign of what was to come. The Barachas were clever enough to not to attempt a direct attack to Nordskorsk, as they would have to fight. They would have to fight for every meter, and their losses would have been great. But they could not wait forever for Tovolog to send out his armed forces, to meet them in an open battle. After so many years, the Barachas decided to retreat and leave the siege of Nordskorsk. Later, Dwarven historians usually comment on this episode, as this episode demonstrates how the Borzhonikas have exploited the greatest of Dwarven virtues in warfare, defensive attitude and long patience. In fact, when the Barachas started to retreat, it was then that Tovolog attacked with full force. The warriors who survived the half-century-long siege attacked, and in a short but bloody battle, where Tovolog himself killed Semjelinka, they defeated the Barachas. The Barachas' uncrowned king died, old but still strong, and Tovolog claimed himself to be the first great Thun of the Great Kingdom, which was then named Tovologoya, after Tovolog himself. However, there were no celebration songs on this victorious day, as the number of fallen warriors was too great. Barely 100 Barachas returned to the lower halls of Niflung after the cruel battle, and Tovolog forced the Barachas in Tovolgoya to renounce all self-government and swear that they would follow the Storthun's laws and decrees. They also had to swear to supply warriors whenever the great empire was threatened and the great king needed reinforcements. With the army in pieces and their king killed, they went down to their dark dens with anger pumping through their veins and no hope left in their hearts. After the defeat, the Barachas lost much of their power, a power which they never got back into Tolovgoya. Forges, wars, and great Thuns. The period that followed is called Kirov Davatkova, or the Battle of 1,000 Hammers. And the forges burned more powerfully than ever before. The dwarves found several major areas with ore and matraka. It was also during this era that many mighty things were created, including Olgaljov, the Black Spear, Malkoram, the Mask of Horror, and not least, Rinagust, the Troll Crusher. This mighty hammer with 2 grips of black matraka is said to still be locked in the Great Thun's treasury. It was as if both Barachas and Borzhonikas felt that they had wasted too much time and blood on war and hostility, and that they now had to get back to what had been lost. The age of the Iron Dragon started, and the Mardi Yarnworm, Tankovsbane, killed Tovragorum the usurper and other local rulers who were self-proclaimed Storthuns in the kingdom's outskirts. These false Thuns appeared, especially in Gdański, during these times of weakness of the Great Thun's power in Novgorsk. But none of them had the power to face the dragon and troll menaces. Shortly after, the Vorfim bloodline assumed the Storthunship of Tovolgoya, in the time when a bloody war began, which the dwarves refer to as the Great Tribute. When the Great War is mentioned, the elves look up at the stars, but the dwarves' eyes turn black. In that dark time, when the kingdom was already weakened by the numerous attacks by yarnworms, a large number of giants and trolls exploited the situation, invaded Gdański and tried to break the Trudvang, forcing the dwarves away. With the help from elves, the dwarves initially managed to stand their ground, but when the war was at its peak, the elves chose to retreat without any explanation, which seemed unreasonable to the dwarves. They broke the alliance and blamed it on old disputes. This is the origin of the dwarves' disdain for elves, as the Dwarven legends blame the forest dwellers for their betrayal. However, there are also other stories about the origins of this grudge, like the one of Fedorov Skildjov and his brothers, who hunted a yarnworm, who, after having ravaged Tlovgoya, went southwards to the island of Soj. Looking for revenge, the dwarves followed the fugitive beast down in Dunjok, a grove in the sacred island of Oskla. Here, they defeated the dragon, believing to have also done a favor for the local elves. However, the access to this holy place was prohibited by strangers. Therefore, the elves immediately killed Fedorov, holding the dwarves responsible for the invasion of their sacred land. Having lost their elven allies, with their forces diminished, there was only one solution left for the dwarves. For the first time since their race saw the terrible light of the Gimmingugap, and the gates were built to block it out, they decided to firmly lock them with heavy stones and walls, which saved many lives of the dwarves who were still underground in the middle levels of Togorod. However, most of those who were shut out in the upper levels of Gdański experienced a bloody death. Some dwarves thought, however, that the greatest loss was all of the weapons and armor that ended up in the hands of the trolls. Although the gates were closed, a large number of trolls managed to get into the kingdom, and because of their lust for blood, they spread great horror. The new great king, Funvar of the blood of Wulfheim, pulled out his troops from Gdański. Some of them wandered as far as Niflung, where the Barachas lived. Over the course of a few hundred years, it became more common to encounter trolls in the tunnels of Gdański than dwarves, and the traces of this can still be seen even today. When the great king Funvar of Wulfheim's blood was murdered, and his heir Mundajn fled as fast as he could to the west, the blood of Wulfheim disappeared from the history of Tolgoya and left space for a new ruling bloodline. It was the new great Thun, Dolga, of the blood of Bomin, who decided to clear all tunnels and caves of trolls once and for all. And he formed a great army to carry out this task. For almost 60 years, the clear-out continued. This was called Gaidedun, after the dwarven word dun, meaning Battle of Gdański, which when it is translated into Vork. When all the trollkin had been killed or driven out, the dwarf known as Olkir, the heir of Dolga of Bormin's blood, took over as Storthun, and to celebrate his victory, his coronation happened not in the chambers of Norg in Novskorsk, but on the battle site in Gdański, the upper levels of Tolvagoya. The great Thuns of the blood of Bomin ruled with power and authority for about 2 millennia during the age of the Queen. These kings imposed so-called Grim laws, which have deeply marked the dwarven culture and have been copied also by their other dwarven kingdoms. They were a collection of laws which gave the Thuls great power in the kingdom, and whoever refused to follow and accept these laws was punished severely. A sequence of ruling bloodlines. There are many symbols of power in Tolvagoya. But the most important one are the keys to the chambers of Norg, where the monumental throne of the Storthun stands in the mighty city of Novskorsk. These keys have passed through many hands during the millennia, as the title of Great Thun has passed through several ruling bloodlines since the early days of Tovlgoya. Due to this victory in the Age of Dreams, Tovlog earned the right to change the name to his own bloodline, and for centuries the blood of Tovlog had ruled undisputed, holding the keys forged by Tovlog himself. When this mighty bloodline extinguished, the blood of Wulfim was led to Tovlgoya in the Age of the Iron Dragon. Later, the Storthuns of the blood of Bomin seated on their great throne of Norskorsk during the Age of the Queen. 3 ancient bloodlines of Tovlog, Vurlim, and Bomin are nowadays extinguished. A few millennia have passed since the last of their kin emerged from the lower depths of Muspelheim. These 3 are the original royal bloodlines of Tovlgoya, all connected to Tovlog, or the 24 original lines of the first dwarves, created by the great god Bajorn. If any dwarf from any of these 3 bloodlines would emerge, most dwarves would consider their claim to the Stormthunship to be made more legal than those of any other dwarf. But most sages believe the lines of Tovlog, Vorfim, and Bomin to have been extinguished a long time ago. During the Age of Prophets and the Age of Stars, numerous bloodlines have competed for the title of Storthun, some with more success than others. One of the most powerful, it is worth reminding, the blood of Dovak, which was nowadays exiled to Gdańsk, and the blood of Ilwir. Am I reading that right? Yes. Ilwir, the latest ruling dynasty, which has been more recently defeated, and its few survivors plan vengeance in Dimit. It has been a while since Tovlgoya had one real great Thun, even though the dwarf who is Thun over Tolovgorad, refers to himself as the Great King, or Storthun, over the whole great kingdom. The truth is, Tovlgoya has not been so divided as it is today. Since the time when Tovlgoya gathered all of the Borjanica warriors to defeat the Barajas so many millennia ago, the dwarf which calls himself the Storthun is named Sulgoya Sosira, of the blood of Adak, the bloodline whose origin is relatively recent, but of great success in wars and intrigue. The blood of Adak, in fact, is not among the original bloodlines, and therefore many have a hard time accepting Siloga of the Sosira clan as the great king of Tovlgoya. This is especially a serious matter, since at least the theory of the great Thun of Tovlgoya should be also a moral majority for the others. Younger dwarven kingdoms of Muspelheim, even if those are technically not vassals of the great kingdom. The problem is that no other Storthun considers Siloga a worthy Storthun, especially since he cannot manage to be obeyed even in the whole of Tovlgoya. Tovlgoya's 3 levels. As long as one can remember, Tovlgoya has been divided into 3 different parts, standing one atop another: Gdańsk, Tovlgorad, and Niflung. Each of these parts includes a never-ending series of tunnels, halls, and various internal levels. Each part has its own characteristics and a peculiar history. In theory, the Great Thun of Novskorsk should rule over all of them, as it was during the glorious days of antiquity. In practice, many later great Thuns, including the present one, have difficulties in ruling anything beyond the middle levels of Tologorad, although they pretend to send orders to the whole great kingdom as it once was. Tovolgoya is so large and extensive that it is impossible to describe. Below are a number of sites that may be of interest and sources of inspiration for new ones. Locations in Gdańsk. Highest up, with its 10 levels, is Gdańsk, consisting of an endless storm tunnels, which are large enough for whole armies to march, ports, defense systems, and natural caves. These are the upper parts of Tovolgoya, nearer the surface, although the lowest part are still many mines below the Great Iron Tooth. This is a place where all of the relationships with the outside are dealt with, but also the place where throughout the centuries has suffered the most invasions by trolls and humans. Dvulgord. A broken-down group of dwarves live near the surface, forced into a life of shame, the heirs of Dvak, Goodheart, blood of Dvak, one of the bloodlines which followed the blood of Bomin in the rulership of the Great Kingdom. Nowadays, this fallen line live a secluded life in the mining town of Dvulgord. Since the Stormthun Dvak Goodheart died more than 100 years ago, even the Glorka, who was most fanatically loyal to him, stopped giving tribute and gifts to Dvulgord and to those of the bloodline of Dvak. How Dvak and his brothers could lose their power to the new bloodline of Ilwir, and how they were forced to hand over the keys to the chamber of Norg in disgrace, is still a mystery. Many argue that it was when Dvak handed over the Mitraka gates to the elves that the clan's misfortune began. Dvulgord is not a great city, and nothing to brag about, nor do the mines in the vicinities provide a lot of ore. Not even the iron that is mined here has any quality to brag about. The truth is that many dwarves of the blood of Dvak have begun to deny their own bloodline, which proves that the bloodline is about to fade away. Some say that the best thing would be if one of the other bloodlines could come pick up the traditions of the old runed inscribed slabs of Dvak, so that the history is not forgotten. Although it is not confirmed, it is said that the only thing of value which is still present in Tulvord's treasury is Malkorum, the mask of horror made out of Matraka and having legendary magical powers. If this is the truth, it would mean that the bloodline of Dvak could very well flourish again and command significant power, perhaps even power over the whole of Tovolgoya. Just the rumor that the mask may still be present in Dvulgord makes other dwarves reluctant to openly criticize or make themselves an enemy of the blood of Dvak. Komsk. The city lying near Tovolgoya's eastern gate used to be called Vasnakomsk, but since the trolls took control of the city during the Age of the Iron Dragon, it has since been known as Komsk, the place where you go where you do not go. Komsk has, since the war between dwarves and trolls during the Age of the Iron Dragon, been crowded with trolls, goblins, and other shady creatures. So many years have passed that nowadays, it's almost impossible to notice that the dwarves once lived there. Later on, Vasnojork was cleared of the frightening creatures, but the city and the gate were so damaged that the dwarves refused to settle down here again. Recently, a new group of large trolls have wandered down from the gate and settled in Komsk. Rumor has it that the trolls fled from the dark woods after they found someone or something in the forest pond that were followed by a group of black-haired elves with pale skin. Komsk actually consists of 4 smaller towns, which have more or less which are more or less grown together. Every city was built on a huge cliff, and they were connected with a large number of suspension bridges. The largest suspension bridge connects the city and the trail leading up to the gate. Once upon a time, there was also a large cable car, and it was possible to find traces of its cableway in the city's eastern part. When the dwarves lost the city for the first time, they destroyed the cable car because it was the only way to continue further into the kingdom. The trolls tried several times to rebuild it, but they did not have the required skills for doing it properly, and the dwarves always destroyed it whenever the trolls were getting closer to finishing rebuilding it. Loganjin, the main gate. Most people imagine Tolvagoya's main gate. They probably think of a grand wonder made of monolithic blocks of stone and towering gates. The truth is, Tolvagoya's main gate is the exact opposite. It is a well-kept secret, and very few know where the gate is hidden. The gate is no more than an empty, gaping hole, which extends deep into the mountains, where it runs into the steep staircase of thousands of steps, leading down into the darkness. Though there are many blind alleys and passages in which visitors can easily get lost, this is the only path that leads directly from the surface down to Novskorsk. During the first 2 days' descent, visitors will see nothing else other than the cold, dark stone and empty tunnels. Possibly, one may encounter smaller groups of tunnel hogs, or a couple of trolls who got lost in the darkness. But one will not see any dwarf. One will not meet any dwarf, or at least one will not see them. It is said that the opening itself is the very first hole that the dwarves dug when they met the Gimnangangap for the first time. Moginla. In one of the many stories of old times, the great Thun, Tonkokas, promised Vilvov, Black Eye, that he would be granted all the land that he could mine, the stones from in 3 days. Obviously, Tonkokas never thought that Viljov would manage to mine so much stone that he could build an entire city. But with the help of 3 giants called Ile, Gile, and Chloe, and also additional help from dark magic, Viljov managed to obtain a large area where he built a city for himself. The city was named Moginla, and it competed with Novskorsk in both size and beauty for thousands of years. Here you could find a treasury, forges, celebration halls, and a fortification, which was both ingenious and impenetrable. Moginla's greatness, however, led to its fall. During Potlen Stolka's leadership, the city was buried under water and stone after a great earthquake, which made the soil above the kingdom collapse. Perhaps in their eagerness to achieve great things, they did not think about the surface, and perhaps the city might have been safe if they did not dig so close to it. Thousands and thousands of dwarves died overnight, crushed under boulders or washed away in the floods. On the surface, above the city, a giant lake was once located, whose name has long since been forgotten. When the earthquake started, the roof cracked and the water buried the city. Today, there are traces of Moginla in the form of runes, statues, and polished rock walls, which rise up out of the water. Most of it, however, is covered in a thick, lush moss, and because of the light that now reaches down from above, the dwarves have abandoned the place a long time ago. Eventually, goblins and other kinds of trolls found their ways down to the underground swamps created by this disaster. Rumors also say that a loja worm settled down in this area and that she laid her eggs there. It has been many years since a dwarf visited Mulginla. They speak about it in the city of as a city of ruins, as a useless, deserted, cursed place. Perhaps this is because the rumors that the trolls now live there, or even worse, that the dwarves who died in the earthquake walk the city as undead. No dragon eggs have been found, but the myth of the meter-high eggshells, hard as rock, still circulate around the great kingdom of Tovolgoya. The people in the capital sigh with nervous frustration when one says that they should find out whether the rumor is true or not. Yungar. Not far from the copper mines in the Wildland, Yungar is located. Known as the Gate of the East due to its location, like the main gate, this is not a grand or distinctive gate. The gate has, however, been provided with a heavy door with thick locks. The cliffs surrounding the gates are polished and worked, but otherwise it is nothing more than an empty, gaping hole leading into the darkness. The dwarves who live near Yungar have recently suffered from a lot of pain. Evil humans found the gates a few seasons ago. They decided to explore the site. When they realized the dwarves lived there, at first they tried to deal with them, but when they were denied, the humans instead decided to take what they wanted by force. The dwarves decided to retreat quickly, but many died when the Wildlanders attacked in full force. The humans have established a more or less permanent camp near the gate, and mount occasional expeditions to explore inside. Most attempts, however, have ended with the curious interlopers being killed by the dwarves underground. These Wildlanders are outlaws and are led by Fjordi Bloodeye, the notorious former herdman of the Fylkjarl Rockvufer. He has been sought for a long time because of the crimes he committed, which is also one of the reasons why he is where he is today. Locations in Tovolgorad. In the middle, with its 85 levels, is located Tovolgorad, the core of the empire, which also includes the kingdom's largest city, the legendary Novskorsk, with a history that goes back to the Age of Dreams, when the mythic Tovolog defeated his Brujata enemies and ordered the chambers of Norg to be built around the mighty throne room. Tovolgorad offers everything from huge mines to underground lakes, from wide tunnels to monumental cities and impressive mushroom caves, all stretching for immense distances through the underground. Bifrost or Bifrost, which is what the humans call the area, is a place that is cherished and spoken of in many tales and songs, including those written by humans and elves. Bifrost is located northwest of the capital of Novskorsk and consists of a huge hub of walkways and stairs leading down into the depths, cutting through all of Tovolgorad, somehow reaching the lower levels of Niflfung. To walk down these paths over bridges and narrow passages and to think that you will find the right way without a good guide or a map is the height of foolishness. The system is so complex that no one has attempted to draw a map or entirety of Bifrost. To simplify the area, one can say that the stairs dominate the top levels, bridges the middle areas, and the tunnels the lower levels. Bifrost is obviously more or less just a large pit with a bunch of passages and stairs leading down into the depths. There are a large number of side tunnels, parallel shafts, and suspension bridges, and chains which bind and hold together this system, which is a maze of passages and blind passages leading down into the underground dwarven halls. The system is so extensive that there are dwarves who make their living by guiding visitors to various parts of the underground kingdom, and it is said that it takes almost 2,000 different guides to get you all the way from the upper to the lower levels. Demlink. Near Soldovrak, Demlink is located, a city which is the most famous for their impressive vaults containing Mitraka. In the deep vaults protected by countless locks and iron gates, a great Mitraka treasury can be found, which is destined to become Black Mitraka. The bullion is sorted in different rooms, where the metal's destiny is to be formed into the same or similar items. In the first rooms you will find the ore whose fate it is to be formed in the near future, and further in the chambers one finds ore that will meet its destiny in the distant future. Some rooms contain only a single piece of metal. These bullions are considered to have very special destiny and require solitude to mature until the day when it is time for them to be shaped according to their fate. Dimit. In Dimit, they prepare themselves for war. A war with Sovloga Soirsira, of the blood of Adak, and all those who support him. Those of the blood of Ilwir have seen their power disappear more and more, and cannot tolerate the situation any longer. That a dwarf who does not belong to any of the original bloodlines dares to call himself Storthun and controls the vaults. The leader of the bloodline of Ilwir, Jokula Omon, has openly declared war on Adak's bloodline and feel that they are not violating any law because Saloga is not a lawful ruler. Jagulka has managed to form an alliance with a number of Baracha families, something that has not occurred for several thousand years. The time is not right for an attack on the capital, but Jagukla strongly believes that once he strikes, the victory will be crushing. He expects that almost 100 Zvorda warriors will fight for him in the battle. As if that was not enough, the Barachas have brought up numerous weapons and suits of armor of Mitraka as gifts. Why the Barachas are helping Jagukla is unknown, but there are those who believe that he has promised Niflung to the Barachas and to be held as their great empire if they can help him get what he wants. Halls of Sankla. North of Novskorsk, not far from the shaft that leads up to Gaidansky, lies the halls of Sankla, known as the Armor Halls. Here the great warriors' armors and weapons are kept. This is where one goes to collect weapons when the great kingdom of Tolvagoya is threatened by war. Each bloodline has its own armor hall, where their warriors prepare to defend the kingdom. Connected to each armor hall, both forges and smelters are located in order to, as quickly and efficiently as possible, repair, reshape, and fix armors and weapons so that they suit the needed conditions. One should not mistake these armor halls for those that are adjacent to each dwarven town or fortification. In the halls of Sankla, only the best and the finest armor is kept. They are made by the empire's blacksmiths, and officially these armors are all owned by the kingdom, and not by any one single dwarf. Although most of the armors are earmarked for certain people, in the special part of the Hall of Sankla, more than 200 Zvodorka Maki, the Black Mitraka armors, are located. This is the latest collection of such armors above Niflung, the largest collection. In the same hall, 4 complete Rokjar Maki with their correspondent Murgles masks are kept, and at least 2, perhaps as many as 5, dragon armors made out of the red scales from a loja worm. Some armors take a long time to get ready and require the aid of numerous blacksmiths, squires, and other servants before their wearers are ready for battle. Heavy rings are threaded onto strong arms, helmets and face masks of iron are placed on the head, neck protectors and shoulder plates are lashed on with iron wire, and back armor is attached with heated mandrels. In this way, all of the armor is kept in place. When the heaviest armor is in place, it takes just as long a time to take them off, and that is the reason why they do not do this when they are sure the warriors will be facing a long-lasting battle. Connecting the halls of Sankla, you will find the best armorers and blacksmiths in Tolvagorad. Here you will find armorers that have achieved legendary knowledge of how to produce the coveted dwarven armors. There are blacksmiths who make whole suits of armors or morgles, but also those who specialize in manufactures of mandrels used in Matraka armors. There are all sorts of craftsmen, all of whom are there to ensure that the warriors are ready when the great kingdom is attacked or faces other external threats. Moshkon. When a new dwarf joins his brothers in Tolvagoya, he does so through Moshkom, the Ledge of Fellowship. The dwarf enters from the underground by walking up endless stairs, which finally open up to a round room with thousands and thousands of windows. Dwarves sit here, representatives of each glorka in the whole country, and witness the celebration. Njost. The underground lake of Njost has no bottom. Its depth can only be compared with the Guningagap, and in the black waters lives a dragonhjord, an ancient monster which is the only one of its kind. Maybe it is the snake which Borjorn fought when he created the entire Earth's skeleton, or perhaps it is the only surviving dark ancestor of the loja worms. Some say it is Yuk himself who is lying and waiting in the cold, dark water. Most of the dwarves are convinced that this is the case. Most people stay away from the lake, and few dare to cross it. On the rocky beaches of the northern shore of the lake, one can find beautiful light crystals, and this is basically the only reason why a small but very brave few regularly travel across the black water. Novskorsk. Novskorsk is the heart of the main city of Tolvagoya, and it has been the Stormthun's high seat since the beginning of time. The place is more like a gigantic defensive complex than a typical dwarven city. In the center of the city, the famous treasure vaults are located, holding the kingdom's greatest treasures and artifacts. The only way you can reach the vaults is by crossing a narrow bridge, guarded by the Zvordunkun warriors from the Baratja's clan, who still respect the vows given by King Tvolog after their defeat so many millennia ago. Around the vaults, the throne room and the master forge are located, as well as a number of important ore and stone mining areas. The whole complex is known as the Chambers of Norg, named after the legendary Borjanica architect responsible for designing the area during the Age of Dreams. So here's an image of the throne and Novskorsk, the main gate we already talked about. Yeah, the treasuries and throne rooms. Nice. The Great Thun traditionally holds the keys of the main gates, separating all of the important areas from the outer world. The one who holds the keys of the Chamber of Norg is also the one who rules in Novskorsk, and by tradition, the Storthum of Tvolgoya. The next ring around the city mainly consists of various craft workshops, fortifications, and most importantly, the Thun Maze, which is where the Storthun lives with his brothers. From the center of the city, larger and smaller paths and tunnels lead virtually to all levels of the kingdom. The new self-proclaimed Great Thun, Segloya Sosira, Blood of Adak, strictly controls the city, and much of his clan has moved here and driven away many dwarves of older ruling bloodlines, especially those of the blood of Ilwir, nowadays exiled to Dimit. One can say that the city has received new life and that now a lot of good things are happening around here. The Great Thun has strengthened the defenses, filled the treasury, and increased mining activity in the main mine, but often it is at the cost of those who are not so close to the Thun, who have greatly suffered. To demonstrate his power, he gathered the 4 most prestigious members of the oldest surviving bloodlines in Tvolgoya and forced them to kiss his sword, which is an ancient gesture of servility in dwarven culture. None of these dwarves belong to the 3 extinguished bloodlines of the old great kings, but unlike the blood of Adak, they all belong to the original 24 bloodlines of Borjorn, whose origins lie in the Age of Dreams, a factor which would give them much more legitimacy as Stormthuns than what Saloga has. Not respecting their heritage, Storthun Saloga Sosira gave them the option of being lowered into the Borloga, the Well of Souls, which is a deep shaft which is impossible to get out from, or submit to his rule. Saloga Sosira was also secretly ordered to murder several prominent blacksmiths and thuls in and around the capital, as they were too powerful. They had too much power over the kingdom. No concrete evidence exists that the Great Thun Saloga is really responsible for the murders, but everyone agrees that this is the case. It is said that the Storthun spends a lot of his time in the great treasury of the Chambers of Norg, surrounded by many legendary treasures which have been accumulated by the past Great Thuns in more than 5 millennia of history. The scene is often evoked where dwarves speak of the Great Thun either as a way of giving legitimacy through the appropriation of the old relics, or more often as a way of depicting them as unworthy usurpers stealing the ancient treasures of the Dwarven race. Petsin. There is an old saying among dwarves that you use when someone gets lost, but still finds their way back. It goes like this. Thank Borjorn, Yuk, and all the jewels that can be found in our kingdom that you did not end up in Petsin. Petsin is a sinister place, where they worship the dark forces since the Age of Dreams. Some dwarves have wandered to Petsin and never returned. Few know where the place is located, but everyone agrees that one reaches Petsin by walking south from Novskorsk. Some say that it is located somewhere between levels 66 and 68. Petsin is governed by a cult that worships the darker side of Dwarven culture and nature. No light is allowed here, and anyone who brings or somehow exposes the place to light is punished with death. These cultists have rejected all the gods and worship only the entity known as Petska, the darkness. No one knows why the cult attracts young dwarves, but some youth suffer from despondency and emptiness when they are at that age. For them, there is no hope, and the ones who are not captured or imprisoned walk to Petsin and join the cult and worship darkness. Those who live here do not belong to the same brotherhood or bloodlines. The only thing holding them together is their worship of the dark forces. Bojornica are the only ones who are affected. Baracha dwarves seem to be completely spared from this dark desire. Relgarv. There's a place where the tunnel hogs are larger than anywhere else. Sorry, just a sec. There is a place where the tunnel hogs are larger than anywhere else, and the crystals grow larger and higher than anywhere in the kingdom. This place is Relgar. Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble seeing, so sorry about the angle here. This place is Relgarv, and was once a beautiful place that, during the age of the Queen, it was struck by the deadly, poisonous, and contagious Olgar fungus, which is related to the more common edible crustal mushroom. Within a few years, the entire urban population and many other dwarves who live among the city died. The devastation was total, and the city was abandoned. Today, Relgarv is buried under an ocean of fungi, of many different kinds, not just the deadly Olgar fungus, and different sizes, reaching even huge dimensions. Most people who visit the place come here to hunt tunnel hogs. A few adventurers come to Relgarv to try to dig down beneath the fungus and into the remains of the city, which is said to be full of treasures and ornate palaces, left untouched since the inhabitants who died or fled from the city in panic. Most of these foolhardy adventurers die in their eagerness to gain access to the treasures, either because they are killed by furious tunnel hogs or because they encounter the Olgar fungus, which still carries toxic spores. Not far from Relgarv, the remains that was once a major, if not one of the original bloodlines, are found. Those from the blood of Olgar had, during the Age of Prophets, gathered huge wealth, and their treasury was filled with many jewels and gold bullion. Today, scattered brotherhoods live in the tunnels around Relgarv, and they have built a small town called Fyr, where their Thun, Smoj, lives. There are a few who have seen Smoj over the last 10 years, but rumor has it that he has been turned into a mushroom-eating madman, with the same symptoms as the tunnel hogs suffer, who have eaten too much crystal. One also hears stories that other brothers, led by Jurgi, plan to seize power over the bloodline. Zvast. No one really knows who discovered the place first, but many believe that it was the famous Lode Hurk himself who is also believed to have discovered Glittertongue, the mighty stream of Mitraka, from which was created the Axe of Volfim, which was once wielded by all the Storthums of the ancient Vorfim bloodline. According to the dwarves' faith, every mountain has an old vein, a kind of unique core consisting of metal only found in that particular mountain. When one finds this vein, which is rare, it is a great event, just like when they found Svast, the vein in the Great Iron Mountains. It is believed that the old vein is by far the cleanest part of the mountain, a kind of pure spirit that should not be destroyed or broken, because the mountain may lose its soul and collapse. The Great Iron Tooth's mighty old vein of unique metal is red, shining, and glassy-like, a glassy-like substance, said to reveal one's destiny if you look deep and long enough at the metal. Nowhere in Trudvang have the dwarves encountered a similar metal, and therefore it is also suggested that this vein is the soul of all of the Great Iron Mountains, the place where a large part of the old vein has been exposed, but not mined. It is barely 6 days' easy walk north of the capital of Noskorsk. It is a popular place, which is guarded by heavily armed stonemasons who have sworn to protect the place so that no metal will be ruined. Timil. It is unusual to find books among the dwarves, for the simple reason that there is not a lot of paper in the underworld. Instead, knowledge is usually passed on through storytelling. However, there is a mythical place that houses vast stores of knowledge regarding the dwarves and other things. The place is called Timil, and it is located at one of the lowest levels of Tovlagorod, almost directly below Novoskorsk, but slightly to the west. It is as close to a library as one can get among the dwarven holds, but instead of endless rows of books and scrolls wrapped in leather, the knowledge here is instead inscribed on slabs of stone. In Timil, one is met by endless passages where the walls are lined with stone slabs, all of which reveal different kinds of knowledge. The deeper and further into the tunnel you get, the more important the knowledge is. It is said that this place holds almost as much knowledge as the legendary elven halls of Malakaina. But this knowledge is so hard to find that one needs the help of hundreds of dwarves to find what one is looking for. Timil is exceptional for its population. It is the only settlement which is uninhabited, almost exclusively by Rungthuls. These sacred historians, usually rare in their settlements, as each Glorka rarely have more than one in the same holding, and a single Rungthul works for all of the Glorkas. It is not the case in Timil, where the apprentice Rungthuls come from all over Tovolgoya to learn this art and help the numerous local masters to keep the ancient knowledge. There is also some guards and servants helping the Rungthuls, but they are only a minimal part of the local population. Yetzin. Yetzin, or the Temple City, is also known, is a sacred place for all the dwarves of Tologoya. The city is carved from one single enormous stone, which, like a huge black monolith, rises from the floor of a large cave. Although the dwarves who found the rock were of the Igelthuns, they understood immediately that what they had found something was unusual and possibly somehow linked to the sacredness of the mountain. When the stone seekers eventually arrived at this place, which the discoverers had described, they could, with great reverence, confirm the explorer's story. The cliff they faced was black, and when they sat to question the mountain spirit as to what shape it wanted to be formed into, all of them received the same vision: a great temple, which would become the center for all Thuls of the kingdom, should it be carved from the rock. Just a few days later, the first stonemasons started to shape the top of the cliff. The idea was to start from the top and work their way down. No material was to be wasted, since no other building materials from the outside could be used. Everything the masons removed when they created the city's buildings would be used to shape the building's interiors, and therefore collected in great piles below the cliff. The carved stone did not lay empty for long, and next to the cliff, as they used it almost immediately. When the future city's top floors were roughly completed, the stonemasons continued further down along the cliff's edge and further into the actual cliff. As the construction continued, other dwarves worked to complete the city's streets and buildings, and with the same diligence. It took more than 900 years before the city was completed, but the great kingdom's Thuls had already begun to move in as soon as the first floors were finished. Many powerful objects have been created in the temple city. Frondcleave, which is said to be able to cut through stone, or Clodrevi's Firmungmurgi, which encloses the wielder in flames, and the Hammer of Potnik, which can be used to shape incredibly hard metal objects, are just a few of the examples of legendary artifacts that have been created in the city. Locations in Niflung. The bottom part is called Niflheim by the humans or elves, but that means the world of mist. The fog-like atmosphere surrounding the mighty forges. The dwarves call this part Niflung, which actually means the same thing. There are many narrow roads which lead down to Niflung, but most people take the route through the Bifrost, a huge excavation of stairs and bridges that eventually leads to Fulgorod, down to Tolgoya's deepest parts. The Boracha live down there, in the warren of tunnels and forges. Many have tried to measure how many levels there are to Niflung, but nobody can come up with an answer. Niflung is very different from the two parts above, and does not have the same planned structure. Narrow passages can suddenly and unexpectedly open up into huge forges with furnaces, or end in a steep cliff overlooking the burning lava rivers. Small, simple bridges reach over endless gaps, which not even the dwarves dare to guess how deep they are. The lowest levels of Tolgoya are also the darkest and most mysterious. The mist and fog-dominated realm hosts secret ways more exotic than the Boracha. Never-ending tunnels and natural cavities pierce the underground, and nobody knows how far they go and how deep into the dark heart of Trudvang. Alekash. It has been a long time since anyone has seen a dragon in the great kingdom of Tolgoya. Not even Ivar Bunkor, who it is said to be the oldest living dwarf in the entire land, can remember having seen a live dragon. But despite this, people know that they exist, that the yarnworms rest in the rivers of lava, and that sooner or later they will make their way to the dwellings of the dwarves, again as they did in ancient days. Kareli Iyimla, second in command to the Irlimna Gorka, after his brother Dugar, is said to have found a dead yarnworm a few years ago, not nearby a lava river, but oddly enough, nearby the waters of the Golgorand Lake, which was done with with the skin and bones no one needs. But many believe that the Kareli and his brothers worked the skin to make suits of armor, which are said to withstand both fire and blade. You can see the Glorgon's lake if you cross the mighty bridge known as the Alikaj. And it is said that whoever follows the lake's northern shore will find natural caves, which in turn lead down into the depths. Because there are no roads leading down to the lake, few visit it, but dwarves wholeheartedly believe that the caves lead to a place where the mountain is entirely liquid, where the yarnworms live. It is more than 400 meters down to the lake from the bridge, and many dwarves have lost their lives in their efforts to climb down to the water. Lugakilj. Tukorov was the name of one of the Baracha dwarves' most talented smiths. He lived in the Age of Dreams, and his brother, Semjalinka, the legendary champion smith of the Barachas, from him he learned the art of luring the lozha into the furnace. However, Tukorov did not settle for a normal lozha, nor a normal forge. For many years he was busy building a furnace that would produce the most beautiful things that could be created. Tukorov had gained the title Borjornalinka, a dwarven term meaning the one who could equal Borjorn. And this was bestowed on him both for the art of forging matraka and that of building forges. He was the only dwarf to have achieved this. When the famous furnace was finished, it was 100 meters tall and had a circumference of 22 meters. It was 18 chambers and 24 air intakes. Around the waist of the furnace there were mighty runes inscribed in such a combination that no logi that was trapped in the forge would be able to escape. It was said that Tukorov didn't sleep for 5 years after having finished his forge. According to the myths, he spent all the time silent, gazing upon his wonder. Eventually, he gathered his courage, for he knew that if he let the wrong logi to settle down into the mighty forge, it would result in serious consequences for his smithing. For another 10 human years, he sought the perfect logi, until he found the Logorij. This creature was a gigantic logi that lived since the first logis were awakened in the magma hearts of Trudvang's underground. According to some myths, his fire was so devastating that it was said that iron melted if it came closer than 100 meters from him. Through guile and trickery, Tukorov succeeded in leading Logorij to the great forge, but the logi was too clever to be lured to its interior. Tukorov promised that he only wanted the logi to take a look at the furnace and to tell him if it was well made, and after that he could go. At that, Logorij demanded that Tukorov should accompany him into the forge, so that Tukorov would not be able to deceive him. Tukorov hesitated for a moment, but then accompanied the logi into the great forge. When the two of them were inside, Tukorov felt the power of the forge secretly speaking to his heart, how it craved and begged Tukorov to be allowed to capture the Logorij, and how it promised that the things that would be forged here would be the finest that could ever be forged by dwarven arts. Then Tukorov knew that he would not be able to deceive the logi into staying. Quickly he gave orders to his apprentices who were outside the forge to close the openings, despite the fact that he was still inside. The apprentices hesitated. They did not want their master to die, but so strong was his wish that eventually they did as he commanded. It is said that Tukorov and the Logorij were fused in there together, and that the two became one. Since that day, Logorij has been the most important Logi forge in all of Trudvang, and so many beautiful things have been forged by its fire that they could fill an entire treasure chamber. The forge lies on the outskirts of the smithing halls of Logakilj, which is situated in the northwestern part of Niflung. Logalinka, the Burning Fall. Deep down in the eastern parts of Niflung, some distance away from both smithies and workshops, there is a lava fall with a drop of 200 fathoms. It resembles an enormous burning torch, and because it rests in a gigantic cavern, you can see the fall from a long way off. Not many dwarves dare to come here, despite the beautiful sight that greets you. In the cave and around the lava fall live several gigantic logi, and it is said that it is here that the biggest logi ever has been spotted. The tales of its lava fall are many, but perhaps the most widely known is the myth that about the existence of a gate crafted in gold and jewels behind the fall, that some say leads to the remains of the lost land of the Muspelheim. Through the years, several Muspelheim have come to the fall to investigate if there is any truth to this myth, but they've always returned silent and frightened, not wanting to speak of what they saw. Tebux. Tebux is the name of what perhaps Niflung's biggest smithy and city. Here are approximately 10,000 Baracha dwarves and as many slaves in a conglomeration of forges, narrow tunnels, fire pits, and stone structures. In Tebux, there are no fewer than 40 logi furnaces and over 300 great smithies. In Tebux, the master smith Borjolt rules. They call him Smithy King, or the Matraka Thun. Borjok belongs to the Nolgost bloodline, whose first members so long ago were said to be Borjonika dwarves who wandered back into the depths of the underworld after having lived too close to the surface of Trudvang for many thousands of years. However, there is something that Borjok denies. He himself proudly proclaims that he is more of a Baracha dwarf than anyone else in Niflung, and that he is proud over never having seen what is known to the humans as the sun. He also says that he has never seen either elves or humans, another claim that he is overly proud of. Urjal. Legends among the Baracha dwarves speak about a being called Mulgin. It is said that he was resting in the earth, and that his resting place was a black rock that was so hard that nothing could break it. The dwarves found the stone when they were digging for ore over 1,000 years ago. They brought the rock to the mighty Loja furnaces, and from the heat a shape soon formed around the stone. The shape was black, but it looked like a human. Eventually, the humanoid started to talk. He enthralled the dwarves to a point where they opened their treasury chambers for him, an event so contrary to the dwarven natural disposition that it is to evaluate the sorcerous powers of this creature. Mulgin helped himself to the treasure before heading off toward the surface. Only the humans know what happened next. But what has been secret for all these years is that the same place where the first rock was found, two more existed of the same sort. The place where the rocks were located is called Urjal, and lies in the westernmost part of Tolvagoya, where an impetuous underground river strikes the rocks of an unknown gorge, making the underworld boom. Tales in Tovolgoya. Andvare. According to the dwarves, Andvare was a greedy and unreliable dwarven thule who murdered all of his brothers before he broke into the Glorka's treasure vaults and stole the most revered treasures. Among the things he stole was the mighty ring Andvarnat, which many regarded as cursed. Just as Andvare was taking his pick of the treasures, he was discovered by other dwarves passing by, who tried to capture him. After having been on the run for several weeks, Andvare came to a strong underground water stream where he hid. To make sure that the pursuing dwarves would not see him in the stream, he magically turned himself into a black pike. The treasure he hid under a large underwater rock where the stream was strongest. It is said that Andvare still lives in the stream to this day, and that you can see him swimming in the underground streams. Dwarves who spot a black pike in the stream become both frightened and excited. Frightened because they have all heard of Andvare and the evil he carries. Excited because they know that there might be a treasure nearby. The Trident. Atrov, Brok, and Sindrov, just the names of the three Zvorda descending from the Brojanika bloodline, awakened fear in many Baracha dwarves. Already, when the three were youths, the myth about them has spread as quickly as fire devouring a forest. It is said that this all started in a time when no dwarf had emerged from the depths for a long time, that the dark pit gaped empty, and that no footsteps were heard from the stairway of endless steps. The dwarves started to doubt, and the Aigal Thuls were called in to interpret the silence. Had the dwarves done anything wrong? Perhaps they had awoken the wrath of Yuk, but suddenly one day heavy footsteps could be heard against the hard granite. Long before you saw who was coming, everyone understood that it was a Zvorda. Every step he took caused the shaft to rumble. Everyone, of course, wondered who it would be, and not the least which bloodline he belonged to. Eventually, an enormous dwarf appeared, bigger than anyone who had previously wandered up from the depths. His body was as big as a troll's. A whisper went through the shaft that he stretched to his full height. "It is I, Atrov of the blood of Grimm," he said in a deep voice. "I am the first of three." To everyone's surprise, two more dwarves of the same size wandered up from the depths of the blood of Grimm. All of the blood of Grimm. For the first time in a long while, the bloodline of Grimm had not only one, but three warriors who everyone would fear. The older brothers in the Glorka immediately made it known that they would use the three brothers to take back the piece of jewelry that had been claimed by the Baracha dwarves that was stolen during the Battle of Large Tribute. Dressed in heavy Matraka armor, they were thus sent into the depths to search for the necklace. Counted in human years, it has now been almost 50 years since they went down to take the piece of jewelry back, but it seems that they haven't yet to find it. In their search, they constantly met Baracha dwarves, which they fought, and therefore the reputation of their relentless sweep has spread. There are Baracha dwarves who argue that they perhaps should surrender the piece of jewelry to spare lives, but the most hardened only respond with silence or reach for their swords. The Baracha dwarves call these three brothers the Trident, because there are three of them, and like the points of the weapon, they strike and kill together at the same time. The last time anyone saw the three brothers was when they fought against a group of Baracha dwarves close to the Kurgalinka, a large cave system near the lava rivers of Niflung's lower parts, which is a famous den for those who hunt lorgies. Whispers in the depths. There is a place which is hidden from most, but the myth about it frightens many dwarves. It is said that there's a dark shaft whose edge is surrounded by mysterious runes. Anyone who goes near the shaft can hear whispers in an ancient tongue that resembles dwarfish, but at the same time does not. Fools who have tried to interpret the place often just shake their heads and say that the shaft lacks a bottom and that there is no firm point down there. Of the runes that surround the opening, they have only managed to interpret one word: Yuk. Of course, this has made the dwarves very watchful and superstitious about what might be found down there. Bold dwarves who have dared to climb down into the depths have always returned with the same message: there is no bottom. No matter how far down they have dared to climb, they never reached firm ground. The deeper they climb, the stronger the whispers get, and no one can say how far down you have to go to reach the source. All right. Our next kingdom. Brokmuskrim. Ymir Dwarves is the name of those who inhabit Brokmuskrim, the underground kingdom below the Ymir Gate mountain range, and their history is a long and bloody one, where the history of Tovolgoya is colored by ancient war between the Boracha and Borjanica. Brokmuskrim's history is colored by the direst conflicts and never-ending civil wars, dividing not just bloodlines from one another, but sometimes even brother from brother in the same clan. No one, not even the dwarves of the Ymir Gate themselves, can say when the halls of Brokmuskrim's kingdom were first inhabited by dwarves. But it is known that the name of the land comes from the first Stormthun, Grigog Brokmusk, who, with the power of the Ymir-stone, managed to unite all of the dwarf lines who dwelled in the depths of the Ymir Gate mountains. Before that, both Boracha and Borjanica dwarves had lived united under several different minor thuns and ruling bloodlines, with no single Storthum over the whole kingdom. They all quarreled over resources and deep shafts, like humans quarrel over rich and fertile lands. There was a continuous war and trouble, but both within and between the two races of dwarves. In one place, two Boracha clans could fight bloody battles year after year, while in two other places, Borjanica Glorkas could be fighting each other with the same fanaticism, while the Boracha Brotherhood could fight with a Borjanica Brotherhood in another part of the land. In some places it went so far that brother fought against brother, which is very rare in Dwarven culture. Both humans and elves, who are well read in the history of the Ymir Gate, are convinced that the reason behind these dwarf conflicts were the large resources that existed in the depths. Something that, however, it is only partially true. Sure, they fought over resources, but not for the reasons that other races fight for. For all the eagle fools below the mighty tops of the Ymir Gate could not settle on the will of the mountain. They all had their own view of what the mountain's different resources were meant to become. The leading stone seekers of every city had his vision of how the mountains should be shaped, and that the ore from a certain place should be forged into. Because no stone seeker could settle on the will of the mountain, the division led to many quarrels between all the bloodlines and brotherhoods of the Ymir dwarves. And these conflicts have colored and are still coloring the land today. Dwarves from other lands around Trudvang speak of the Ymir Gate as a dark and evil mountain range. Fools from these lands whisper of an evil mountain soul that has corrupted the dwarves that live there. They argue that the mountain is restless and wants to be shaped quickly, but the mountain does not know what it wants to be shaped into, and this indecisiveness has led to many and long wars. The Mahun feud. A notable example of what the mountain's indecisiveness can lead to is the so-called Mahun feud, a conflict which has afflicted Bormuskrim over the long history of the land. It all started with a new Mitraka deposit being formed in the depths of the northeastern parts of the Ymmergate. When the area's Igelthuns came to interpret the wills of the mountain, they could not agree on what the spirit of the mountain wanted the ore deposit to be used for. Because the vein was so large and valuable, 7 expert and old stone seekers sat down to interpret the will of the mountain. Nearly half a year they spent in front of the Mitraka vein to try to connect with the spirit of the mountain. When they were done, the 7 Igelthuls each had a specific vision of his own about what the vein would be shaped into. Each of these 7 interpreters were convinced that all the other Igelthuns had interpreted the will of the mountain wrongly, and that their vision was the only correct one. In reality, none of the interpreters had it wrong, but rather the exact opposite. All of them were in fact right in their interpretations, since the mountain's indecisive spirit at different times had wished the vein to be turned into each of the 7 visions. The stone seekers stayed by the vein for another half a year, during which their visions were discussed both hotly and fiercely, but they could not agree, and therefore left the Mitraka deposit to go home. They left the Mitraka deposit to go home to their own Thuns and hand the decision to them. It did not take long before the Igelthul's differences had spread to the 7 clans. The disagreement lasted for almost 75 years before it finally broke out into war, whose ignominy is spoken for to this day. The war lasted for 45 years, involving almost all the Ymir dwarves, and when it was finally over, the 7 brotherhoods had almost been destroyed. But soon 3 new expert Igelthuls were sent to the vein to interpret the will of the mountain once more. But when the same thing happened, the 3 new stone seekers and their clans, as had happened with their predecessors and their Glorkas, it became clear the Mitraka vein was cursed. Prohibitions against visiting the deposit were established, and 4 imposing stonefilges were set to guard the gates that would never be allowed to open again. The place to this day is still called Mahun, which means dark spirit, despite the riches that, according to the legends, are supposed to exist behind the gate. No one has tried to claim them. The first great Thun of Ymmerstone. Similar feuds came to rage between the Dwarven families for several hundreds of seasons. Several attempts have been made to unite under one single Storthun, but the mountain's indecisive spirit has always managed to create discord between the different bloodlines and brotherhoods. This has had to wait until the day when Gigorg Brockmusk, in his hunt for deposits, brought down a wall which opened up into a large cave. Almost at the center of the cave, next to the small subterranean lake, an enormous block of stone rose toward the ceiling. Grigorg, who right away felt a strong attraction to the block, immediately started to pick at it, as if something was in its center was calling to him. For an entire year, he was away from his family and his home. When he later came back, everyone understood that he had been found in the heart of the mountain. For him, he had a large diamond, which, uncut, was as large as a dragon's egg. Without speaking, he stepped into his home and let the Glorka's 2 companion Stonefilges watch over his gate. For almost a year, Grigorg sat and watched over his stone, for he possessed the power of an Egil Thul, and therefore decided himself to seek answers from the spirit of the mountain. During this time alone with the stone, he managed to understand the mountain's indecisive spirit. He understood how the mountain thought and why it would give its inhabitants so many different visions of what it wanted to be shaped into. By seeing the heart of the mountain, he understood that every newly found deposit should be made into. The soul of the mountain now became part of Grigorg's soul. When he later stepped out of his home with the most beautiful and biggest diamond that had ever been seen in the Ymir Gate, it was clear to all dwarf families that the diamond was the heart of the mountain, and that the soul of the mountain now lived in their first Storthun. The heads and self-proclaimed lords of the brotherhoods gathered from all corners of the mountain range to swear unity under Grigorg Brukmusk, but when they all stood before their new lord, they could not help but feel envy, since they all wanted to own the Ymir-stone, the heart of the mountain. Surin and the decline of the Ymir-stone. For a long period, the Ymir dwarves lived in harmony, with only small quarrels breaking out, disturbing the peace of the land. It was not until Surin Brukmusk tried to take over the throne from his older brother, the 11th Storthun of the land, that the Ymir stone started to lose its power. Surin was the youngest of 7 brothers, sharing the royal Brukmusk's bloodline, and had never been able to accept that his low position in the clan. With contempt he looked upon his older brothers and Storthun, and soon realized that he was above everything else, and he wished for himself to become the land's great Thun and sole owner of the Ymir stone. With guile and bad intentions, he began to slay his older brothers. One after another, they had accidents. One brother was impaled by a stalagmite, which for unknown reasons fell from its place in the ceiling of the cave. 2 brothers were seen falling down an unending shaft after the path they were walking on suddenly collapsed. Another brother fell mysteriously ill after a night of too many mushroom brews and died shortly after in agonizing stomach pain. One could suspect that all of these accidents were in fact murders. Deadly falls were instead blamed on bad luck, and a curse was said to be afflicting the Brotherhood. Dwarven Thuls across the land spoke of the happenings as if the mountain's soul no longer wanted to share its wisdom with the great Thuns. It is said that the spirit was leaving them, and that this new dark age, full of family feuds and war, were now beginning. It did not turn out to be as bad as that, for when the Stornthun Wojisloj found his younger brother Surin sitting on his throne with the Ymir-stone clutched to his bosom, the happenings came to a sudden end. In anger, Wojisloj immediately blamed all of the family's misfortune on the younger brother's insults to the mountain spirit. However, Wojisloj did not understand until Surin was trying to plunge the dagger into his right eye that it was Surin who was behind the mysterious death in the family. Before Wojisloj fell to the ground dead, Surin was overpowered by the Storthun's bodyguards. Barak, who was the second oldest brother, found it hard to understand his younger brother's betrayal. When later that night he was named the land's next great Thun, his emotions were in turmoil. The next day it was time for the newly crowned Stormthun to proclaim his first order. Surin was to be buried in the soulless mountain, artificially crafted with soil instead of rock. Thousands of dwarves helped to bring down the top of the mountain, which today is called Surin Mountain. Piece by piece, it was carried far away from the soul of the mountain and its origin. For almost 5 seasons, the dwarves labored over the moving of the mountain's top out from the Bindlendian plains, With the dwarves' fear of the great infinity outside, the mountain's protective roof in mind, it is easy to understand the magnitude of the crime that had been committed. Never before and never again had so many Thuls united in carrying out their mission, as there was the winter's night when the artificial soil mountain was to be put together in the middle of the towering mountain top. A chamber was made that was to be both the prison and tomb of the murderer. It was finished. In the finished chamber, a special sort of mushroom was planted, whose foremost quality is the ability to sate both hunger and thirst for the murderer. Before the artificial mountain was finally sealed, the Thun murderer Surin was placed in a small and austere chamber. Through a small air shaft, passers-by could hear the mad dwarf scream out his regrets. How long Surin lived in this prison, no one knows, but considering the nourishing mushrooms that grew in the chamber, combined with the dwarf's fear of dying, and without a mountain spirit watching over him, he lived for at least half a human's life before he finally gave up. At the same time as the power of the Ymmerstone was slowly ebbing out, and the ruling great Thuns wielded less and less influence over the land, the dwarves under the Ymmergate returned to their former society, and the mountain's indecisiveness and impatience again caused the dwarves to fight over the existence of deposits. 7 Storthuns of the Brookmusker's line followed Borak. Before the reigns of the Brotherhood came to an end, the power of the Ymmerstone diminished with every Storthun that came after, until toward the end the stone became merely a symbol of power and provided no real benefit to the great Thun of the land. Today no one knows what happened to the stone. Some claim it was stolen by trolls and that it can be found above ground. Others say that it was split into smaller pieces and spread out among many minor Thuns of the land. A few people claim that the mountain spirit made the dwarves hide the Ymmerstone so that it may rest and gather new power. It is said that the Ymmerstone will one day allow itself to be found again, and that it will then once again gather the dwarves of the land under a single great Thun. Brookmuskrim today. The kingdom is divided again, without a single great Thun ruling the Ymir dwarves, just like the era before Grigog Brookmusker, with the power of the Ymmerstone, who had managed to unite the dwarves in the depths of the mighty mountain range. The land once again fell into darkness, filled with conflict and violence, but a very few moments of peace when no wars disturbed the mountain range have broken up the violence. However, since these times are rare exceptions, and because there are so many bloodlines and brotherhoods in Brookmuskrim, all with will of their own, the constant tensions which exist between the Glorkas and brothers have caused the dwarves of the land to anticipate the trigger of a new feud during the times of peace, and with the new feuds, large-scale wars often follow. Dwarves from the other lands than Brookmuskrim shake their heads in sadness when they hear about this undwarfish way of living. They equate the Ymir dwarves with humans and speak of them with great pain in their chests. At any given time, there may have been as many as 50 Thuns who have united the clans and families of varying sizes beneath them. Every Thun considers himself to be the owner of a specific part of the mountain, just like the humans consider themselves owner of their lands. Formerly, before the era of Grigog Brookmursk, several families could share the same deposit or region without being feuding or fighting. But today, every Thun makes sure that their own territory's borders are patrolled by chosen border guards, including trapmasters. None is allowed to pass a border without both official approval and a good reason. Ingenious traps are built on these border areas to stop dwarves from neighboring families and brotherhoods from coming in without an invitation. If visitors for some reason want to go into the territory, they have to choose one of the agreed-upon passages or tunnels that exist just for this reason. These tunnels are neutral, and anyone can travel in them when they are traveling from one part of the land to another. Today the land is filled with around 30 or more, or less, self-proclaimed Thunes, who all claim to be the rightful Thune of the land, all with varying power and position, even though the bloodlines and brotherhoods of the Thunes are of varying sizes. They are all sure that it is their Thune who is the real and rightful leader of the Brokmuskrim. The subjects of every Thune are just as sure that it is their bloodline which is the mightiest. Egel Thules, which of course are right in everything that they interpret about the will of the mountain. The rest of the stone seekers are, they argue, simply wrong in their interpretations. One land, many Thunes. The small wars which are constantly defiling the mountain ranges have made it close to impossible to keep an exact history of the lands, families, and Thunes. Only the largest families who have ruled over the greatest territories have established themselves in the history of Brokmuskrim. Today, there are 7 bloodlines and 8 Thunes whose power and territorial size stand out from a number of smaller Thunes and heads of bloodlines. It has now been over 300 years since the Great War disturbed the mountain range, but much indicates that another great war may soon break out. Small skirmishes have already occurred now and then between lesser bloodlines and brotherhoods. However, these are often broken up within a few months. It is easy to understand the chaos which rules the lands, because often the family who ends up victorious is neither of the families who were initially involved. There are many times when a neighboring family sees their chance for interfering when warring families are at their weakest, and easily come out victorious in the battle without having to do a great deal. Today there are 8 dominating Thunes of Brokmuskrim. 5 of them belong to the Brojornica bloodlines, and they rule over different regions of the upper part of Brokmuskrim: Jorgrim, Brogjorn, Ferver, Ulvim, Kornik, and Misveski, while the Disvelt holdings are divided between the twins Zlorki and Kivgzort. The remaining 3 major Thunes all are Boracha, and their domains are all deeper down inside the lowermost levels of the mountain range. They are Bozjiv, Pludnik, Fedorov, and Voljenka, and the old, wise Vidorov Drogsnislai. Beside these 8 Thunes, there are also another 20 to 25 minor Thunes, but since their bloodlines, brotherhoods, and territories are so small, they are usually not mentioned by name, especially since the lesser Thunes have a tendency to quickly disappear or be changed after short periods, sometimes only after half a man's age. Thune Jorgrim, Brogjorm, and the outside of the mountain. In the middle of the mountain range's northeastern part lies the land of Thune Brogjorn's Jorrims. Brogjorm is a Brojornica dwarf, whose bloodline stretches back a long way. In the history of Brokmuskrim, some even claim that the Brogjorn family already existed when the Storthum of the Brokmusker line was alive. Brogjorn's area is dominated by 9 clans, which have been allied for centuries. The unity of these bloodlines is strong, and everyone looks up to their Thune and his younger brother, the Thule Brodverg. The territory which Jorgrims rule over is situated in the northeastern bowels of the mountain, including everything from ground level up to the tall peaks. Also, outside the mountain's protective ceiling, you can find dwarves whose blood belongs to the allies of the Thun Brogjorn. The fact is that a significantly large number of dwarves have chosen to live under the sun, in the valleys and mountain slopes on the outside of the mountain. It is said that these dwarves have grown tired of the indecisive soul of the mountain and went out of the cursed mountain to start a new life. During the last decade, however, dwarves who chose a new life outside of the mountain have had less and less influence on the affairs of the territory. They themselves argue that their villages are too important a part of the Thun's land to be forgotten, especially since they can provide their cousins in the mountain with supplies which can only be found above ground. Despite the ostracizing of the dwarves outside the mountain, there are rumors in some areas of the territory of a mass escape from the mountain. Many seem to be tired of the disorder which is constantly present in the mountain range, and would even defy the infinity outside the protection of the mountain to escape all the misery. In some places, these rumors have even been realized. Some believe that the significantly more will follow the example of these emigrants. Especially now, when one of the biggest reasons for the isolation is the disorder that the Thun in the northwest has caused. The fear for war has spread in the recent years among the families of the Brogjorn's territory after reports of Ulvim's activity in the northwest and his arming campaign leaked out to the people. The neighbor in the northwest has, according to rumors, added significantly to his territory by simply beating the weaker Thuns and their brotherhoods, who live in small clusters around the bigger Thuns. The neighbor's warring has all but forced Brogjorns to arm his warrior guard, which has further aggravated the escalating rumor. But the looming war has not been solely negative for Brogjorn. Without having to raise the threat of war against the smaller Thuns in the area outside his borders, his territory has slowly but surely grown in size. Because of the looming war, the lesser Thuns in the vicinity of Brogjorn have chosen to bow under the rule of Thun Jogrim instead of being forced into war with Ulvim's armies when they reach the area. Thunforver Ulvim, the conquering warlord. In the northwestern mountains, from their peaks to the ground level, the old Borjonica dwarf Fervor Ulvim rules with an iron fist. Fervor is an aggressive leader who, in the eyes of all others, has seemingly lost the will to create and shape the mountain. Instead, it seems that he wants to conquer a territory as big as possible for himself. Fervor himself thinks that the dwarves of Muspelheim have to unite under a single great Thun, and who this Thun should be is not a hard question to answer. He argues that the Ymir dwarves can properly shape the mountain in the way that is supposed to be shaped only under the guidance of a single, strong-willed leader. Therefore, he has, during this incredibly long, almost 50-year-long leadership, armed his subjects and led them to war against his neighbors in the mountain range. The old warlord has already managed to double his territory through violence, but also through peaceful means. The lesser Thuns in the vicinity have simply given a choice, give up or fight for the territory. There are not many who stand up against the aggressive Thun. The few who have resisted have either been destroyed or driven to flee. Fervor has, in his pursuit for power and territory, gone as far as hiring trolls from above ground. With the promises of dwarven-made objects, both plundered and as payment, the trolls have not been able to resist the temptation. The hired trolls act as a vanguard, which is supposed to take the brunt of the force, and many are those who succumb to the ingenious traps and defense mechanisms the dwarves like to have in the outskirts of the territories. The fact that many of the trolls die has so negative effect on hired trolls, but rather the opposite. If their brethren in combat die, there will be more plunder for them, is how they think, which makes the troll troops even more effective. For every troll they see die around them, the number of objects that they can get for themselves has increased, something that makes them even more determined to reach the goal. Fervor's plan is to first conquer the smaller bordering Thun's territories. When these have accepted his leadership, he will go after Brogjorn, and thereafter Misvetsky. When he succeeds with this, he will be in control of the northern mountains, from the tops to their fee. Thereafter, his territory will have grown so big and strong that the rest will have to submit, and he hopes that at least one or two of the remaining Thuns will submit without bloodshed. Thun Kornik Misveski, the traditionalist. Kornik Misveski is a Bajornica dwarf and follower of the old customs. He does not care about political games that play out around him. Instead of focusing on politics, Kornik makes sure that that his subjects shape the mountain. Constantly new bridges are built over the bottomless shafts. Tunnels are dug through the hardest granite of the mountain. Pillars raised which support unused cave halls. Stairways cut into the sides of deep chasms in the mountain are built, and tools and objects of all kind are manufactured. All of the time, his focus is the shape of the mountain and its deposits. No thought can be wasted to other earthly things, such as politics. All he wants is to obey his mountain and create beautiful objects to put in the Brotherhood's treasure chambers. The counselors pressure him pretty much daily about the political games that happen in the levels above his territory. However, Thun Kornik Misvetsky does not think it is important. He says that dwarves think only of war in Broxmiskrim, and that he simply will not be part of that conflict. He will, of course, defend himself should it be needed, but he does not think it will. It will come to that. Kornik believes that, as has happened many times before in the history of the land, the aggressive and power-hungry Thuns will fall, and that their power balance will return to normal. Visitors who have been allowed to enter the territory of Misvetsky all attest that the most beautiful or well-crafted architecture cannot be found in all of the Yimmergreat Mountains. Some even go as far as to say that Misvetsky's territory has some of the most beautiful and advanced Dwarven architecture in all of Trudvang. But these stories are something that Kornik simply brushes off, for he is not yet done. So far he has only done the rough work on his bridge, stairways, pillars, and halls that exist in his territory. When he is finally finished with the rough work, he will go over everything again, to really make it into the spirit of that the mountain wants. Kornik believes that the lack of will among the Ymir dwarves is to refine what they make, and it is one of the greatest factors contributing to the mountain's indecisiveness. If all have been as careful in their work as he himself is, the mountain would have not confused them, as its spirit is doing now. Kornik believes that the one always has to create the object or structure which the Egel Thuls first think he is seeing when he interprets the will of the mountain. Everything else is just a delusion. He cannot understand why the other dwarves of Brothmiskrim have not yet realized this simple, obvious fact. It is whispered among the inhabitants of the territory that Kornik has a piece of Ymmerstone in his possession, and that it is because of this that he knows what the mountain wants to be shaped into. Others claim that it is not just a piece of stone, but an entire Ymmerstone that he has in his possession. Some of the more extreme rumors even go so far as to say that the mountain spirit and Kornik are one. They say that Kornik once in his youth fell down a bottomless shaft. All believe that he had died in the fall, when one day he came back. Seemingly unharmed, they understood that the spirit of the mountain had watched over him. Soon his closest relatives realized that something had happened to Cornic. He had achieved an understanding of the mountain that no one else in his bloodline had ever had. The years passed when Brajor Mevitsky and the then Thun died. There was no doubt about who would be his replacement. Cornic crowned as Thun the next day, even though there were brothers who were older than him. The older brothers had all sworn off their claims to the throne in favor of their younger brother, and since then all inhabitants of the territory have lived in harmony with the mountain. Thun's Zlorki, Kvitzholt, Dimzelt, and the Quarling twins. Rumors about the looming war have also spread to the eastern parts of the mountain, where the Bjornica Dinsvelt bloodline rules over territory, which is today divided into two. Just as during many other times throughout history, Brockmutsgrim, two brothers have turned against each other. Ever since childhood, the two twins have competed against each other, first in a way the many siblings do, but soon it is turned into a childish competition over the reign which their older brother would soon hand over to one of them. But this never happened. The territory of the Dinzelt's bloodline was instead divided into two equal territories and split between two brothers, who since that day have never spoken a word to each other. A neutral zone was created between the two brothers' territories where tunnels, caves, and chambers were evacuated. Imaginative traps and warning devices were created by engineers sent out by both brothers and guards, and that were stationed closely to watch the border. No one but the two twins' younger brothers were allowed to pass through to the neutral zone. Younger brothers have acted as mediators during the feud, but without much success. For a time, both of the competing Thuns lived in peace and ruled over the territories like any other regent, but soon their minds were filled with hate and jealousy. At first it was purely material jealousy, in which one brother thought the other had gotten the better of the two territories. Later, it was the people who inhabited the other's region who were the source of the jealousy, because both felt that the other had gotten a more populated part and a more hard-working and skilled labor force. The twins soon started to suspect each other, and therefore started to arm their subjects. For 35 years, this stalemate has persisted in the Dinsveld regions. Rumors of a looming war in the northwest have been entirely ignored by the two brothers. Instead, the twin Thuns have focused ever more on arming for a war between themselves, and have therefore stopped caring about the affairs of other regions. Even if both brothers intensely hated each other, this hatred has not spread to their subjects. Many of those Glorkas who were forced apart because of them living in different sides of the neutral zone, many attempts have been made by brothers who tried to get through the neutral zone to reunite with their relatives on the other side, but few managed to get through both the station guards and the traps in between. The escalating hatred between the brothers has now reached such proportions that Vizhol, the twins' younger brother, has also started to scheme against them. He has managed to convince the rest of the brothers that both the twin Thuns can no longer be left in charge, and that their hate has grown too far. A third party has therefore entered the scene, completely without the knowledge of the twin brothers. So far, the third faction is only in its planning stage, but contact has been made with both brothers, more skeptical followers, and connections have been made. Soon they were expected to make their move to remove the twins. Thun Fedorov Voljenka and the Stone of Power. Deep down below the center of the mountain range, roughly below Misvetsky's holdings, the Baratcha, smiths of Fedorov Voljenka, work ceaselessly. The Logi forges burn hotter than ever, and never before has so much been produced during a short time as during Fedorov's time as Thun. Fedorov took over after his elder brother's death and has since pushed his subjects to hard work. The new Thun has a similar view on the reason for the mountain's restless spirit as his neighbors above, Kornik, Mitsvetsky. But where Mitsvetsky strives for quality, Fedorov strives for quantity. He thinks that the only rapid production can still the mountain spirit's hunger to be shaped. It has even gone so far that his people have started to convert an area of their deposit even before consulting the spirit of the mountain. For Fedorov, thinking that it's better this way, both for the mountain and for the continuously occupied dwarves. The real reason for Fedorov's quantitative way of thinking is very different from the arguments which he tells his advisors outside his closest circle. The real reason, which only a few outside the clan know, is that Fedorov, as both Thun and Igel Thul, has felt a powerful object somewhere far below the feet of the mountain. Unfortunately, he does not have as strong ability as his predecessor possessed, and can therefore not precisely see where the object is situated. All he knows is that the rock is supposed to be in a large cavern. Fedorov believes that it might be a rock as powerful as the diamond that Grigor Brokmusk found and cut so very long ago for getting the Yimmerstone. If he can only manage to find it and show it to the other Thuns of the mountain range, he will be able to convince them to yield to him. Because of this, he has made all the dwarves in his territory work ceaselessly. Every day, new walls are torn down to open up new mountain halls and tunnels, deposits which are found to have to be worked, of course, in order to placate the mountain spirit, but it has less to do. It has to be done fast. Who knows, the mighty stone and the objects of Fedorov's search could be behind the next wall, or at the end of the next tunnel. Spies for the holdings of Plodnik, another Baracha Thun, is to the east, say that the strange search has there begun. The rival bloodline has, according to spies, started to dig deeper down in the depths. The reason for the excavations is said to be that the stone seeker of Plodnik has felt the presence of a powerful object. These rumors and information have caused Thun Fedorov Volginka to focus his attention towards the east, because he now believes that Plodnik's Igel Thun also sensed the same object. At all costs, he has to reach it before his rival, so that he can become the owner of the new Yimmerstone, which he then will proclaim himself the true leader and the only Stormthun of Brokmiskrim. The thought of Plodnik reaching it first has even caused the otherwise friendly Fedorov to allow his closest followers to start planning to assassinate him by poison, either the Thun Brovjiv Plotnik himself or his stone seeker. Recently, the other neighboring Baracha Thun, the old Vidorov Drognisle, has also started to intervene in Fedorov's actions, but Fedorov does not think he has anything to fear from the old Thun. Perhaps despite this, Fedorov has let his closest advisors plan to murder the old Thun as well, so that he will not ruin his plans. Thunbazijiv Plotnik and the Demon Rock. For the Barachka Plotnik bloodline, the last 40 years have revolved around one thing, delving deeper into the mountain and Trudvang. Everything started when the young Igel Thun Vildford had received a vision. Vildford had then immediately stormed into his older brother and Thun Bazjiv's room, just as the Thun was polishing his oldest handicrafts. This was an incredible act, since the Thun Bazvij has always threatened banishment to the surface and other ingenious punishments if anyone disturbed him during this time. He spent in his chamber, filled with the bloodline's most valuable and oldest heirlooms. As was to be expected, Thun Bosvij became enraged when he was disturbed, but when he saw the seriousness in his younger brother's eyes, he understood that something important had happened. At first, Thun Bosvij could not believe that what the Stone Seeker told him, but he soon found himself convinced, and the greatest project in the history of the Brotherhood was launched. Verdfoj had that morning, after becoming intoxicated from too many mushrooms, come into contact with the spirit of the mountain, which told him that the mountain was to expect from his clan. The spirit had told of a cave deep down below the mountain and the surface of Trudvang, a cave that was supposed to be directly below them. The spirit of the mountain had said that there was a black rock, and that it was the rock that was behind the indecisiveness of the mountain and the many wars that had been afflicted throughout the ages. The spirit had told him that the rock was filled with demons from the worlds far beyond this, and that if they could destroy it, the spirit of the mountain would be at peace. Shortly thereafter, the project to save the mountain spirit began. The Brotherhood started to dig even deeper into the mountain, and a large hole with a diameter of nearly 30 paces, its interior ringed with a stairwell, soon plunged its way into the depths. Today, almost half a century later, the Baracha dwarves are still digging without pause. They have now passed the deepest halls and quarries of the Voljatka, and as far as they themselves know, there is no one else who has dug deeper below the mountain. They have not yet to reach the cave with the black demon rock, but they are just as determined to finish their mission today as they were the day their great work began. Because recent years have revolved around the Brotherhood's holy mission, Thun Plodnik has completely missed the looming Great War which threatens the kingdom of Barak Muskrim. The few times when they have spoken to outsiders and received news reports from the other side of the mountain range, they had not yet taken the news about the war seriously, for they are sure that they will find the stone and destroy it. All disorder in the mountain range will cease, and that they themselves will stand as the leading bloodline, with the Plodnik Storthun, who rules over the entire mountain range, just like Grigor Brokmusk did the day he found the Ymmerstone. Thun Vidarov Drogenasle, the old wise Baracha lord. In Dwarven terms, the very old Baracha dwarf, Vidar Drogenasle, suffers when he sees his fellow Thun's pursuit of either power or powerful objects. With age, both wisdom and insight into the good of the mountain have come to the old Thun, whose many brothers believe to have miraculously and mysteriously acquired the Stoneseeker's gift due to the benevolence of the mountain. After 8 years of meditation, the insight came to him. He had promised himself and his friends before he started the meditation that he would rather die in an attempt to find out the reason for the indecisive spirit of the mountain than give up. Virdarov had crossed over a wide stream of lava to a small island, which became his home for the next 8 years. When Virdarov sat down on the island, his younger brother raised the bridge that led to the island so no one could get out to the meditating Thun. 2 large stone figures were set to guard the great cave, through which hot lava streamed forth, and as a final precaution, they also had the cave entrance sealed. No one was to disturb the old one. Years came and went without them hearing from Thun Vidarov, but no one was especially worried about the health of the Thun, because a dwarf that has put himself in a meditative state like the Thun had could live close to 15 years in this manner without either food or water. The meditating dwarf simply became one with the mountain, and after just a month or so the dwarf's skin turned gray, as if they were made of rock. If it was not for the dwarves being made of flesh and blood, and therefore soft to the touch, someone passing by would not be able to tell a meditating dwarf from a stone statue. 8 long years passed before a crash could be heard from the sealed gate. The 2 stone figures were the first things that you could see when the dust from the demolished gate had settled. Vidorov then came forth on wavering legs, but with a sharp expression. All then realized, when they saw the Old One's face, that he had succeeded in his mission. The old Thun, Vidorov Droznisle, was struck by a revelation of truth, as well as by terrible insights regarding the searching activities by his fellow Baracha Thuns of Plodnik and Volginka bloodlines. In his deep meditations, the old and wise Thun, Droznisle, had realized that the mountain range was in fact cursed by demons, just as Plodnik's Egil Thun had seen in his vision. He had also found out that this productive neighbor was in fact searching for a stone which he thought would give him power over everyone in the mountain range. In his dealings with the spirit of the mountain, Vidorov found out that there was in fact a powerful stone deep in the underworld, but it did not contain demons, as the Thun Bosnif Plotnik believed. The demons were in the cave where the stone was located, and if someone opens up the path out of this chamber, the demons will be freed from their prison. The stone also does not contain any special power that can make a dwarf into a great Thun ruling over the entire land, such as Fedorov Volginka believes. But Fedorov is right concerning one thing. The stone is incredibly powerful, for it contains the soul of the mountain. The mountain spirit also warned Vidorov that if someone was to enter the cavern where the stone resides, the mountain will immediately defend itself and Trudvang with a devastating earthquake. A quake that almost certainly would bring down all of Brokmiskrim, but which hopefully would imprison the demons before they escaped the mountain. Vidorov has recently sent several delegations of messengers to the other Thuns of the various Brokmiskrim holdings to find out what is really happening, but the stone-enclosed message blocks have been returned unopened, every time, from both recipients. The several years-long meditation damaged the health of the old Thun greatly. Vedorov never found out what had to be done to break the curse that afflicts the mountain range. Neither did he find out how he could stop both of the Baracha families and their hunt for the cave and the stone. The old Thun no longer has strength to care about the will of the mountain anymore. A sickness seems to have settled in the old Baracha dwarf's body. He has therefore started to plan for his passing. It falls upon the next Thun of the Droznisle family territory to deal with the problems that are discovered during the long and strenuous meditation. How are we doing? Time. Okay, let's do one more. So I guess there will be a fourth part. All right. Oh, hey, Abyss. All right, so the next kingdom. So sorry, I can't leave the book flat. The light is glaring off the pages, making it pretty hard to read. I need this angle, which unfortunately is not very visually interesting. Dalmtatsba. The great kingdom of Dalmtatsba is located in the mountain range on the great eastern island that houses the Stormlander realm of Dalheim. These days, the Dwarven kingdom is far from its former glory. Just like in Erzmir, Dalmtatsba was once famous for the many gemstones to be found in the depths of the mountain. and that became something of a specialty for the dwarves there. For as long as anyone could remember, they had felt especially driven to cut and polish the precious stones found in the mountain. Of course, they lived to shape the mountain and to mine and refine the metal, but it has always been the crafting of gemstones that has been the foremost of professions, and anyone who visits the kingdom can see that this is the case, for everything they create is decorated in jewels. Surviving the Drowned Kingdom. Nowadays, the gemstone kingdom of old is not what it once was, however. Only half of the kingdom still endures, and not even in its brightest moments does it shine like it did in those glory days. Perhaps what happened was inevitable, since the whole realm is surrounded by water. The dwarves had dug their way far too south, and suddenly the tunnels collapsed, and seawater came rushing in, which soon flooded all of the old halls and tunnels and cities that were located beneath sea level. The disaster was over in mere moments, but during these moments thousands of dwarves lost their lives by drowning in an otherwise unusual death for their kind. Not even a fourth of the kingdom's old population remains these days, but those who do live in a similar manner to their old traditions, in that gemstone cutting is considered the foremost of all crafts. Even if it is only a very small portion of the dwarves that holds the honor of practicing this trade, only a few of the mines are still active these days, since most metal and gemstone deposits are located far beneath sea level. The deposits that have been found have quickly been depleted, which means that all kinds of metals and jewels that are sought-after commodities in the kingdom. But since both metal and gemstones have been depleted and at least have become very rare, the dwarves have been forced to find new trade. Thus, in addition to gemstone cutting and forging, the dwarves have also practice in stonemasonry and sculpting. After all, they must do something to please the spirit of the mountain. The kingdom has therefore become filled with statues and examples of fine stone craft. Halls, tunnels, and walls have all been decorated with beautiful sculptures. Without any doubt, all the merchants in Trudvang would agree that the stone craft of the Delmtatspa is among the finest and most valuable that one could find. Prominent and wealthy people from all over Trudvang pay large sums of money, or just as often trade ore, to decorate their homes with one or more of the statues made by one of these master sculptors from Delmtatspa. The most precious and beautiful items are those that are also skillfully decorated with gems, such that it looks like the gem has grown from the item, and that has not been placed there. In some rare cases, the dwarves of Delmtatspa sell stonefigles to those who are able to pay, most often kings or other powerful individuals. The stonefigles, which are made to order, are often shaped in the image of a human hero and are placed to guard riches, but something else has to guard important individuals, such as heirs or prisoners. The rule of the three. The island and its dwarven population are ruled over jointly by the heads of the three brotherhoods. These three are best friends, even though they belong to three different bloodlines. Frugdoi, the youngest of the three, but also the wisest one, has the best nose for trade. It is he who takes care of all contact with peoples from other parts of Trudvang, and it is he who bargains with interested parties over the price of the wares that are ordered. Clovdorvir is the eldest of the three, and is the old stonemason. He decides what should be produced in the kingdom, where it should be placed, and which material it should be made of. He is, of course, assisted by Eagle Thules to tell him what the mountain wants to be shaped into. Logratav is the one who decides what metal is metal that is received through trade should be forged into. It is also he who decides if and when the dwarves are allowed to seek new deposits in the depths of the mountain. This is something that he only agrees to when in his best spirits. However, since he doesn't want to be the cause of another similar disaster as the one that devastated the realm once before. Thus the three each have a task to tend to in their kingdom, and none of them ever interfere with the other's sphere of influence. Although they all have more or less diplomatic or administrative jobs, they are still more than skilled in forging, gemstone cutting, and stone masonry, and they take any opportunity they can to work with something besides their day-to-day tasks. Cities in the water. Since the largest cities of the realm were beneath sea level, large parts of them were below water these days. The dwarves have therefore built new buildings atop the old ones, which serve as the foundations. Because of this, the larger cities in the kingdom may look a bit strange to visitors, at least if they are a dwarf from another kingdom. But all but a few buildings are surrounded by water. Stone bridges span across the mere-like water and connect small constructed islands and pathways that lie just above the surface of the water. Occasionally, one can see longboats with crews of dwarves rowing, moving freight between the buildings. Only the city of Frondidfjord, where the three leaders live, isn't surrounded by water, although at its center a 7-story building is located on a large paved island in the middle of the city. 5 mighty stone fylgis guard the island. The island lies 3 meters above the water's surface, which makes it difficult to ascend from the water, and the stone fylgis are even designed to wake up if someone was to climb ashore on the island this way. An uncertain future. Some in the kingdom, particularly the lower-ranking Ego Thuls, agree that the three shouldn't rule anymore, since they've started to import metal. They claim that this is an insult to the mountain, since they bring in metal that has belonged to another mountain's spirit. Any labor performed on this imported metal is deemed wasteful in their eyes. Dwarven work is to appease the spirit of the mountain in which one lives, not to appease some other mountain's spirit. Logrtov has given his permission to search for metals beneath the sea level in 3 different places in order to silence these voices. He is very careful, however, and has therefore appointed his 3 younger brothers to oversee the project. Logrtov harbors a deep anxiety that another collapse will cause more flooding of their kingdom, especially since no less than 5 mines have collapsed over the last 100 years, of which one caused water to engulf the floor of a smaller village. It is this last incident that cost Logrtov to be as careful as he is today. Next time, it might be an entire city that is flooded. The 3 have lately considered whether they should evacuate the settlement below the sea level. The mountain seems to be too unstable, and the danger of collapse during the evacuations is great. Many are also advocating a rescue of all items that were hidden in the vaults that are now below the water. None has any suggestion of how such an endeavor could be carried out, but they won't give it a rest until they've tried at least thrice. Let's see, is this another short one? Oh, yeah, okay. We can keep going. These are just a few pages each, the smaller kingdoms. Dorgramitsva. Dorgramitsva, or the Realm of the 5 Halls, as it is called in Vork, lies in the Gunra Mountains in Midland. Once this ancient Borjornica realm was known as Ferd Gromitza, the realm of the realm of the 8 halls, but 2 halls have fallen into the hands of trolls since. For the Grundra's house, both dwarves and trolls And for every two trolls nowadays, every two dwarves nowadays there are 3 trolls. Initially, a millennia ago, the dwarves thrived in the mountain range. They mined for resources and built halls and cities whose glory was comparable to those that once was in Dalmitsba, with its beautiful statues and exquisite decorations on the mountain's walls. There were trolls back then as well, but not in the abundance that can be seen today. In those days, the scales were shifted, and for every troll, there were 3 dwarves. A centuries-long invasion. No one knows exactly what happened, but everything changed 7 centuries ago. Suddenly, the number of troll tribes grew, and soon they started to attack dwarves working in the mines, tunnels, or halls. The war was inevitable, and once it started, it would last for 75 years before it settled into the current pattern. The dwarves, who were in no way prepared for an organized attack from trolls, especially given the unprecedented number of the enemies, found themselves defeated and driven back from several places in the realm. Cities and villages fell and were invaded by trolls who, without any significant loss, quickly gained ground. The dwarves responded by fleeing to the 8 cities, which in those days were at the very heart of the kingdom, in order to find safety. When the trolls reached the tunnels which led to the city, they found the now united dwarf hordes were unwavering, and the war came to its first standstill. The 8 cities were still in dwarven hands, and the kingdom could still bear the name Grommitsa, although many minor settlements were lost to the troll hordes, especially in the upper levels of the kingdom. For almost 400 years, the dwarves and the trolls coexisted in the kingdom in something not unlike a truce. The trolls didn't attack the dwarves in their cities, and the dwarves didn't attack the trolls in the lost settlements, although this stalemate was bound to change. Many still accuse Thun Trodverts Runtgarv, who ruled the kingdom in those days 3 centuries ago, of not making any attempt to overthrow the trolls that now lived in their old minor settlements, just a few days march away from them. During his reign, the troll attack began with invigorated fury, which would cost the dwarves 3 grand cities or halls, as the cities had been built in great enormous caverns. The tragedy happened nearly 4 centuries after the troll horde had been stopped for the first time at the gates of the 8 cities. However, now the Thun was unprepared for the scale of this new invasion. The war that raged in the mountain was far bloodier than its predecessors and lasted for nearly 50 years. Thousands of dwarves and trolls died in battle. Having captured 3 large cities full of plunder, the trolls were placated and put a halt to their conquest. Since then, they haven't made any more attempts to attack any of the remaining 5 cities, still in the hands of the dwarves. And this is how Grommitsa changed its name to Dorg Grommitsa. The 5 cities. Now more than 300 years have passed in the history of the kingdom without any larger attempt at conquest from the trolls. The 5 cities are still controlled by the dwarves and have been tied together with large storm tunnels, originally conceived to allow quick passage of the great armies, each one connecting only 2 cities. In this way, people can travel safely without being in danger of troll attacks, something one cannot be certain of if one travels in tunnels other than these. The huge number of old, small, minor tunnels have been mostly sealed or destroyed by the dwarves in order to oblige both the travelers and possible invaders to pass only through certain safe and controlled routes. From the city of Drovdor, which lies near Trudvang's surface, slightly east of the center of the mountain range, one can go through the storm tunnel reaching Proldrig in the southwest, located slightly before ground level in 1 day's march. Grindbarv in the northeast, slightly above ground level, is 2 days' march away, and Droltverv is in the east, a good bit below ground level, and is also 2 days' march away. Finally, Ibrahovi is in the southeast and also located a good bit below the surface. It is also 2 days' march away. Each city is majestic and consists of mainly beautiful buildings which stand in gigantic, enormous, and splendid natural caves, which the local dwarves stubbornly keep on defining with a somewhat diminutive name of halls. Each city also has its share of beauty and art, as it once was, but fortifications, traps, combat training grounds, and barracks have multiplied during the centuries after the invasion started. Many glorkas of artists which once were devoted to carving the best sculpture and the best refined architectural decorations have turned their interest to military engineering. New levels of military defense have been reached in Dorg Dromitza, as the dwarves have kept on developing new traps and ambushing points during the last 3 centuries. Each city is overcrowded, but also thriving, and everybody knows that sooner or later the lost land shall be reclaimed. Living in an invaded kingdom. Despite the danger of troll attacks, thousands of dwarves risk their lives every day when they go beyond the 5 cities' defenses to mine a deposit or work on the walls of a quarry of a cave. Although there are thousands of dwarves that leave the city every day, only a third of those toil on what the mountain has to offer. Instead, the vast majority of these dwarves are warriors who are tasked with protecting the workers, so none of them fall under the trolls' attacks while working outside of the city. Several groups of workers are attacked by trolls every day while on their way to the mines. While many lives are lost daily, the dwarves won't give up working on the mountain. The dwarves claim that not laboring to placate the spirit of the mountain would surely mean a slow and painful death, and thus they persist without hesitation and go to their mines when duty calls. Often these dwarves toil for days in the same place until a new group arrives to take their place. Thus the mines and workplaces are never empty. The groups are often made up of 2 clans, but in especially large workplaces they can consist of as many as 10 brotherhoods. Every group is guarded carefully by mighty warriors, who almost exclusively are the same glorka as the group of workers. No single Storthun rules Dorg Romitza, but the realm is harmoniously ruled by a council of Thuns of the 5 halls, who have the tight-knit cooperation and have carefully observed the trolls for the last 300 years. No civil wars or turmoil are possible here, since every dwarf is focused only on defending the kingdom from the trolls. The higher status warlords are occasionally chosen only with unanimous vote of the 5 Thuns, only to be dismissed when the need ends. However, no major troll invasion happened in the last 3 centuries. The 5 Thuns are now only starting to get a grip on how many trolls there are, and where the greatest masses are located. The dwarves have, despite the daily toll of lives, grown in number, and now realize that the 5 cities won't be able to house all of them soon. They must reclaim one or more of the lost cities. The 5 Thuns, Jigmort, Ferdvir, Lugar, Potvin, and Skurgorg, know that an attack against a troll city could indeed start another great war between the trolls and the Dwarven kingdom, and thus they proceed with cunning and guile. Every dwarven city in Dorg Gromitza has its own small force of Trodemgorger, or treasure collectors, as it would be roughly translated to Vork. Without asking for compensation, which they often receive anyhow, they seek out ancient lost treasure vaults and seek secret hideouts in troll territory. This special group of warriors who have learned to sneak up closely to the trolls without being detected have proven immensely valuable for the imminent war. Since the warriors have learned the locations of the hideouts and vaults, they can, just like when they haul items to the cities, hide weapons and provisions in these locations. When the dwarven armies then reach the vaults, they will find both new weapons and provisions to replenish their supplies. Some of the vaults that have been emptied are large enough to hold a whole army of dwarves. Those dwarves are planning to fill the 4 largest vaults outside the troll-infested city of Rolgfrol, northeast of Prodrig, and slightly above ground level, with arms and armor and provisions. When this has been done, they will try to smuggle dwarven warriors there so that they can launch an attack on the city with a full force once the vaults are filled to the brim with warriors. If all goes according to plan, the city will be secured and the storm tunnel, large enough for a marching army, shall be dug between Rolfgol and Prodrig, while they fill the other tunnels with traps and put them under surveillance so that the inevitable retaliation won't come without warning. The 2 other cities of the west, Prodrig and Solvribia, which lie above Trudvang's surface level, and Koldvij, which lies beneath the surface level, will be in the hands of the trolls for the moment. The 5 Thuns all agree, however, that if they are able to recapture Rolgfrol, it won't be long before they are able to reclaim the other 2 cities as well. All right, let's see how we're doing here. Oh, just let's see. How many more do we have? Oh, that's great art. Oh, this is a bigger one. Yeah, let's save these for a part 3. Oh, that's right. Yeah, we still have Muspelheim. Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. There we go. That'll be good. That'll be an equal 3rd part. So we'll leave here with Erzmir and pick up there next time. Let's just put the ribbon here. All right. Well, thank you for joining me. So we've got another part for the dwarves to finish all the kingdoms, and we'll take a look again at, oh, actually we can do that. We'll take a look at the map again before the next part as well. There's some great illustrations to flesh out all of the activities, but yeah, we've mostly been dealing with here. And where is 2? Wish the numbers were a little bit bigger. So this is Tvologia. Where is 2? There's little tiny numbers right here. 7. Oh, here's 2 in the Midland. So Brook Muskrim was here. The first one, Tovgloya, is here. And so just beneath these mountain ranges. So I think each of the mountain ranges has an indication. Yeah, we haven't done this yet. So mostly the edges. Oh, and we did do Domstavia. This is on this island on the sea. This is the one with the seawater problem. Nice. Yeah, I like this map a lot. All right, so thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for requesting. If there's any other material you'd like to hear more about the elves or the other human settlements we didn't talk about, I think we just basically covered the human cultures and settlements, let me know. But we'll pick up next time with part 3 of Muspelheim, the Dwarven territories. And thank you for joining me. Subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying these readings and want to get notified when it goes live again. I'm not sure. We'll do a kind of best of 2025 soon for the weekly. And and thanks to the members and patrons for making all of this possible. And consider becoming a member or patron. There'll be some exclusive videos and readings and stuff that we'll do behind the paywall for both YouTube members and Patreon patrons. And yeah, we'll be back with more soon. There's plenty more Trudvang to explore. So take care and see you again soon. Goodbye.